Welcome, everybody, to our closing session of the North American International Leadership Conference. Over the last few days, we've had a number of very informative and intriguing sessions talking about the possible reunification, peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula, and the different factors of geography, perspectives, ideology, and economics that play into making this happen. Today, we're going to hear a few closing remarks from several leaders, and we'll also hear a summary of reports of several of the sessions. We'd like to begin with Dr. Michael Jenkins, who is the president of the Universal Peace Federation International and the chairman of UPF in North America. Welcome, Dr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Kaeleigh, and I want to give our heartfelt congratulations to Dr. Thomas Walsh and all of our UPF of North America and Europe. We had a collaboration this time. It was an excellent international leadership conference, much more in depth as we go forward, not only with the associations, but by choosing topics that are really, really important to understanding how to bring peace between nations, and especially with a focus on North and South Korea reunification. We had experts like Professor Yi, who was new to the ILC, who really has very profound insights on NGOs working in North Korea. We also had incredible presentation on the Bering Strait bridge and tunnel and the whole understanding of how that really is possible. And through our collaboration with Europe and Russia, East Europe, with Mr. Konstantin Krylov, we opened many new doors as we had Russian participation directly from the leaders and scholars who are working directly on the Intercontinental Railroad. One of the most important takeaways from that was that we realized that it's totally feasible, rational, and economically very, very doable to build the Bering Strait Tunnel. We've always seen that project promoted, but never had the details from the Russia side on the engineering aspects, and from the American side with Lou Cerny and the experts on railroad development. The Alberta to Anchorage, A2A railroad was approved by President Trump and with support. And so Prime Minister Harper and others very much support that important development. It's stalled now simply because there's still the problem of having a friendship with Russia. That's the whole area of importance. What comes out of all of it, so much of the world can come together if we learn how to really reconcile and make peace. And I think that's why UPF and the work to do and promote these webinars is so important. We also had an amazing session with Shihoko Goto and Purnima that Alan will be talking about. So business viewpoints on how to bring peace. Again, also we had the Japan, Korea, or the Korea-Japan undersea tunnel. Dr. Otsuka, the chairman of UPF, co-chairman with Jacques on UPF of East Europe and all of Europe and the Middle East, did an amazing job. Dr. Park and also Dr. Sato. We had expert presentations on the tunnel. Ambassador Chung also helped us understand. That is another project that just opens up everything, especially when we look at James Rogers' comments that tunnel going to connect Japan and Korea can open up an economic engine once we bring peace with North Korea and China, an economic engine when also extended on up to Russia and the Bering Strait becomes an economic phenomenon that will change and transform all kinds of aspects of trade, tourism, cultural exchange. Amazing. We were very fortunate this time to have also a very powerful session with Dr. Michael Breen and also Dr. Kim and our Norwegian participant, Dr. Bjorn, and Bruce Klingner from the Heritage Foundation, helping us understand the dueling worldviews. Dr. Ward played a key role in this on 2 webinars. The dueling worldviews of the nations that are preventing us from coming together. I want to thank our founder, Dr. Hak-Ja Moon, for her vision that we can really go forward to bring peace when we bring understanding, collaboration, and dialogue. And I see it happening so much. I'm also very moved by the fact that Dr. Walsh really asked us in addressing our topics that we reach up to the higher level of academic discussion and professional discussion. And that certainly opened up the doors for us. We had an amazing webinar in Alaska, in Anchorage, Alaska, which I was fortunate to participate in. And that's where the Lieutenant Governor of Alaska came out, former Lieutenant Governor Meade Treadwell came out and really showed us this is something Alaska wants. Congressman Don Young also in a video that we had also showed the support. I was surprised. We didn't know how much people want this. The only thing stopping us is that we need to improve our relationships with all nations, especially Russia and China, and Europe is really helping us in opening those doors. I want to thank everybody for their leadership, especially our organizers, Mr. Larry Moffitt, Kaeleigh, as well as Mr. Oliver, Reverend Oliver, our Vice President, Tomoko Duggan, Vice President, and especially Mr. Tom McDevitt, who's given us advice and clarity for focus and development, and our moderators. The moderators were fantastic. Our chairman in Canada, Dr. Moonshik Kim, shocked us with one of the highest level presentations, and Dr. Famularo also added his scholarly strength as well as his leadership skills in bringing this seminar together. Again, we're grateful for all of our international team and also our North American team. So I want to thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. Congratulations to you too on behalf of North America. And as you mentioned, Mr. Thomas McDevitt, we'd like to welcome Mr. McDevitt, who is the chairman of the Washington Times, for your remarks at this time. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Kaeleigh. Thank you so much, Dr. Jenkins. Congratulations to you and to everyone. I was not able to attend several of the earlier sessions, but did attend the most recent one with Bruce Klingner and Dr. Ward. And Kaeleigh, I think you did an exceptional job, and thank you for your leadership there. I spoke this morning at 3 a.m. in Asia, tomorrow morning in Europe, and I'm seeing such an amazing trend all over the world that because of our founders and their vision for UPF and this whole approach we're taking on with the 7 different associations in politics and business and media, etc., we're building a network of people like the ones you've all seen and participated with that are prepared to make a difference and committed and capable, talented, and they're connected, right? And they're in the thousands for real. And these are the thought leaders, and around them are tens of thousands of other people. So every single panel we do is building this movement that can change the world. And I think one thing that is fascinating is that in a short time, our work together with True Mother with Dr. Hak Jae Moon has shifted attention to the Korean Peninsula as a central geopolitical issue. And it's gathering input from so many perspectives. It's kind of the essence of the Think Tank 2022. I can't wait till we get our arms around this, start publishing, distilling, developing policy recommendations, et cetera. And that's where the next steps are going to go. And I thought in the last presentation, you guys came up with some amazing new keywords. Like I never thought about a ripening moment, Dr. Walsh, that occurred in history. He's such a great scholar. And the whole notion of an unexpected event, right? And the other kinds of concepts, a Gorbachev moment, et cetera. So I think the work we're doing is so vital, preparing an environment, which is the essential mission of UPF related to our more internal purposes of the Family Fed. Create the environment which will cause a critical, a shift, a transition like we're talking about. And final point is this essential idea of the world being seen with a new view, a new paradigm, which is a family of nations, not simply zero-sum games between countries. I think that's so powerful if you unpack that. Thank you so much. Glad to participate and looking forward to the next step, especially with IMAP and IED. And Alan, congratulations, you did a great job, and love to see all of that grow. Want to help as much as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDevitt. Excellent points and perspective and great summary, especially of this last session, which was very interesting. So at this time, we're going to welcome each of the moderators and coordinators of several of the sessions that took place over the last few days and give them a few minutes to share a summary and highlights of what transpired during that session. First, I'd like to welcome Mr. Ray Lipowcan, who moderated the session on Tuesday entitled Perspectives on North and South Korean Reunification. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you, Mrs. Moffitt. Yes, I had the privilege of moderating session 2 of the ILC, which was titled Perspectives on North and South Korean Unification. And we had 3 wonderful speakers. Professor Yi, who is a professor of political science at Hanyang University in South Korea. Dr. Moon-Shik Kim, who's chairman of UPF Canada. And Dr. Thomas Ford, who's president and professor of peace and development at the Unification Theological Seminary in New York. Professor Yi was the first speaker, and his topic was faith-based organizations in North Korea. And he spoke about how evangelical organizations have responded in a couple of different ways to restrictions that were imposed on them by North Korean government in 2017 and 18, as well as the 2021 pandemic. So unfortunately, they were not able to work in the area in North Korea for those 3 or 4 years. And some have just gone to other countries. He mentioned Vietnam as one where they're setting up and working there, but others are regrouping and are planning to go back into North Korea. And he did bring up one example, it was very interesting, of one of the evangelical groups brought surfing to the North Korean youth, and it showed a way to break down barriers between the North and the South. And Professor Yi concluded by saying, faith-based organizations have a lot to offer, and he hoped that this would be implemented in US policy regarding the peaceful redevelopment in North Korea. And Dr. Kim was our second speaker. He opened with his topic, why North and South Korea reunification is so difficult, even though both Koreas want unification. And he said that ideology was the #1 deterrent. North Korea abides by the Juche ideology, which is an offshoot of Marxism, while the South has a free democratic system of governance. And he spoke about how the UPF co-founder, Reverend Moon, has invested a lot to create an ideology, a counter-proposal to communism, even declaring in his 1991 visit to North Korea that the Juche ideology cannot bring unification to North Korea, to the peninsula. And another challenge he mentioned for the South, or for the unification, is that the South faced a lot of leftist student movements in the 1980s, and this gave rise to a lot of leftist thinking that today has developed into an anti-American and anti-Japanese sentiment in South Korea. And Dr. Kim said, we can liberate North Korea with truth and love once the suppressed people of the North see the freedoms of the South. And he spoke about the arts and culture of South Korea that we're seeing a lot in spreading out to the world, particularly with young adults in the music and dance areas. Dr. Thomas Ward was our third speaker, and he talked about focusing on ideological issues. And he spoke of the Juche thought in the context of Marxism, speaking about how Lenin's and Mao's contribution to today's communism eventually led to the Juche thought developed by the North Koreans. And Dr. Ward based these findings on DPRK statements that he found in recorded documents and conferences where they outlined this ideology. And he mentioned the lineage of the Kim family is very important in continuing this legacy of this ideology. And it's also stating that even though religion is banned in North Korea, the Kim family is looked upon and treated as almost like being godlike. And he emphasized the importance of the work that UPF is bringing to reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula. And then we concluded with a good question and answer session. And we covered topics such as comments were made about the position or relationship of Kim Jong-un with China. And kind of looking at the flip side of that, following up with, can China permit a unified Korea to exist on democratic principles? So we had some nice discussion on that, as well as North Korea's animosity toward religion and the tensions that are involved with spiritual and humanitarian missions to North Korea. And we also spoke about the perceived eventual collapse of North Korea and how China and America would respond. And in summary, I'd like to offer a few recommendations, if I may. And what I would like to recommend is to invite all three speakers back again and to talk a little bit more in depth about the topics that they did discuss. Professor Yi, if he could speak more specifically about the Christian evangelical work and the impact that it's making in South Korea, or I'm sorry, in the North Korea. And we talk a lot about like sanctions and economic policies and denuclearization, but I think one thing that's really at the core of the reunification is ideological and the ideological differences. And Dr. Kim and Dr. Ward both commented on these, and that was the primary focus of their presentation. So I would hope that they could come back and talk a little bit more in depth about these ideologies. And they had both mentioned about the counter proposal that UPF co-founder Reverend Moon had talked about creating a counter proposal to the Juche thought. And I would hope that we could understand and educate ourselves a little bit more. And I think these ILC forums are an excellent venue to educate ourselves. I like to be educated myself. So again, my wish and hope would be to go more depth into these teachings. Thank you very much, Mrs. Moffitt.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lipowcan. That was awesome. And also the whole session was very interesting, really great speakers. And I think we all feel the same way. We wish we could bring all the speakers back from every session. Never seems like enough time to get to the heart of everything we want. So thank you. Now we'd like to welcome Mr. Larry Moffitt, who coordinated and moderated a session focusing on the proposed Korea-Japan tunnel. Welcome, Mr. Moffitt.
Thank you, Mrs. Moffitt. This was an exciting session. Asian linchpin addressing technical, societal, and political challenges of the Korean-Japan undersea tunnel, or the KJ tunnel, as all of the panelists ended up calling it. And this is a group of people that were in on the very beginning of this tunnel, from the very moment it was first mentioned by Father and Mother Moon as a vision. So Dr. Otsuka, who's held every leadership position that's possible related to this tunnel in Japan and in the Family Federation, UPF, and supporting organizations, spoke very broadly of the vision. He also spoke about the International Peace Highway. He touched on the Bering Strait Tunnel as another of the linchpins that's very necessary for this. He talked about the history of these long tunnels. He emphasized that the greatest challenge to tunneling between these countries, any two countries, is that the people in both countries have to want it. And so relations between Japan and Korea are at a low point, lower than they've been in, last 30 years. So, and it's become a major campaign issue in the mayoral election in Busan, where the tunnel would enter Korea. It was a big campaign issue. Conservatives favored it, liberals opposed it. Peace Road movement was created to kind of encourage the International Peace Highway in recognition and as a means to combat economic, cultural, and racial separations throughout the world. And he talked about the Peace Road got started in Japan when a Korean resident in Japan decided to bicycle from east to west in Japan, and got some friends and they went across the country. They called it Peace Bike. Did that for a while, and it gradually began to catch on. And then Dr. Hak Jahan Moon renamed the activity Peace Road, and that was in 2013. And since then, he did it on the first anniversary of Reverend Moon's passing. And then since then, it has caught on, built up, and now it's in almost every country in the world. So he gave a brief history of that. So that was a very good broad presentation. Dr. Sung-Yul Park emphasized the great value the KJ tunnel would have for international trade, economics, and peace building. He is president of UPF in the ROK. Great deal of emphasis on the US involvement and how necessary that is. So that really hit home to me. Ambassador Taek Chung is like the senior emeritus statesman in the foreign ministry in Japan. He was, in Korea. He was Korea's ambassador to Russia, Korea's ambassador to Italy, and also Egypt. So he knows the Korean side better than anybody. And he talked about the geopolitical strategic importance of the Korea-Japan tunnel as a strengthening pillar of the trilateral alliance. It's not just that you need the trilateral alliance to be functioning in order to build a tunnel, but the existence of the tunnel will help strengthen that friendship. So the two go hand in hand. There's very fragile relations between Japan and Korea right now. He said, fortunately, there's been a lot of good talk about the tunnel on both sides. He went down the list of the Korean presidents and Japanese prime ministers who've all given great encouragement verbally to the building of a tunnel. Back when Rotae-woo went over to Japan in May of 1990, and he addressed a joint session of the Diet and spoke about the tunnel. And Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun in Korea and Prime Ministers Hatoyama and Mori in Japan and others have all addressed it. And even recently, President Moon Jae-in in his 2019 Independence Day address proposed a railroad connection between all of East Asia, including Russia, China, Mongolia, both Koreas, and Japan. It's a great idea. I wonder where he got that great idea. Ambassador Chung stressed the importance of the U.S. in citing that Japan, Korea have maintained democratic market economies and good relations with the U.S., and this is the common denominator. Dr. Hirofumi Sato provided glimpses of test work. He showed a lot of photos of these things. He is the current director of the Japan-Korea Tunnel Project, and he showed a lot of photos of work that's been done, and he invited over investor Jim Rogers, as was mentioned earlier. They had a meeting. Jim Rogers, the light bulb went on over his head, and he said, you know, if you build this tunnel, the investment possibilities, this guy's made a lot of money in his life. The investment possibilities are tremendous. And he just saw this as, he already, in his mind, he saw it as North Korea has already opened up. And in fact, there has been a lot of good encouragement in conversation with North Korean officials who have generally liked the idea of the tunnels. He described some of the technical difficulties of building the tunnels. The ocean bottom is very soft under there, apparently softer than most undersea seabed things. Also, it's a seismic zone. So all these kind of things. As the session moderator, I mentioned earlier, the thing that hit home to me was a new awareness of the importance of support from the United States in realizing the completion of the tunnel. Some of the presenters, in fact, said this tunnel can't be built without the involvement of the United States. So we're doing one of the things that's very easy for us to do with UPF USA, because we are doing every week a webinar on issues related to Korean unification. It's very easy for us to look around and find people here in the United States that find out who supports this tunnel in the United States. There are people supporting it geopolitically, and we can do that. One scholar who has written extensively about the need for a tunnel was identified in the session panel by Dr. Park Sung-yo is Mr. Stephen Costello, who's a scholar at GW University's Institute for Korean Studies. So he's just down the road from us. Another fellow I found in just looking around was Dr. Emmanuel Pestreich, founder of the Asia Institute. He's here in Washington, and he's involved in the interplay of technology, environment, and culture with a focus on East Asia. That's exactly right up the alley of the Korean-Japanese tunnel. His research work concerns the convergence of technologies in an age of unprecedented technological change and implications for society and security. So I could see that there must be a lot of doors and avenues opening up, and things that UPF is already doing in its outreach to scholars and think tank people in talking about the Northeast Asia issues, particularly Korea Peninsula reunification. I think there's a gold mine here, and this, I was awakened to that in the process of moderating this session. So we're going to be looking out at that in the next few weeks, and we'll pull some things together. We'll talk with our team, and we'll just make it happen. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Larry. I think that exact point also was brought up in the last session by Mr. Klingner, that if America isn't involved, the relationship between Korea and Japan will not improve. So thank you, Mr. Moffitt.
Right.
Now we're going to welcome Mr. Alan Jessen, who moderated and coordinated a really interesting session talking about the economic interests in the Indo-Pacific region and how that relates to the reunification of the Korean Peninsula. Welcome, Alan.
Oh, right. Well, thank you, Kaeleigh. Appreciate the chance to be with you all and to moderate this session. Yeah, it was a challenging session, very broad area. I think maybe the first time we brought together the Northeast Asian area together with India in the Indo-Pacific region. So we had three speakers: Dr. Franco Famularo, Ms. Purnima Voria, who's the founder director of the India-U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and an Asian expert, Shihoko Goto. Dr. Famularo gave us an eloquent kind of frame of this issue, and because we posed a question, really, will the differing interests, economic interests, aid or hinder the Korean situation? So that was a challenge. The Indo-Pacific region is massive. It covers 44% of the Earth's landmass, and 3 of the top 10 regional trading blocks are located in this area. So there's a lot to work with, and is consistent with what others have said, and probably more for follow-up as well. Dr. Famularo noted that in Western Europe and in North America, the trading groups benefit from a similar Judeo-Christian value basis, whereas in this large region, there's quite a bit of difference. So that we had the question of what brings that together, because obviously when there's trust, then you can foster a spirit of cooperation and innovation that's necessary for economic development and progress. And of course, conflict is really a counterweight to economic investment and development. So that's something we want to lessen. Dr. Famularo offered the 5 values that UPF works with as a basis, hopeful basis and a key to maybe bringing some of these disparate and wide-ranging regions together. So we're looking to build some common basis for the future. Ms. Goto gave us a very interesting little history tutorial. She took us back to what has given rise to the Asian economies. And she noted that there's really 2 models. The first, which we've kind of work under the idea of the Asian tiger, that was, centered on free markets, democracy, and flourishing, and that really carried us through the 90s. But the alternative model has really come on the scene, and that is the authoritarian model is now being championed by China and characterized by the Belt and Road Initiative. So that is posed a bit of a challenge, especially, and she named kind of brought up the word the middle powers for many of the other countries in the region, that they now have to kind of negotiate and work between this great power competition that's in play right now between US and China. So I think that's where the trade organizations come into play and can be helpful. They remain leery of China, but they're united by a commitment for growth and stability. So that's a hopeful thing, because nationalism sometimes can counterweigh efforts towards a larger cooperation and finding common interests. In regard to the Korean Peninsula, she noted that the primary concern of Asian countries is a common desire for an orderly transition. So whatever might, the future might bring, these countries definitely do not want to see a mass exodus of people, as we're kind of seeing, come out of the Afghanistan debacle. So that's, again, encourages the need for more cooperation and regional cooperation and planning and being aware of things as they develop. And that's, again, where I think UPF can really help out. Mrs. Voria, she was not feeling well that day, but she came on and she really gave us her best, and I appreciate that very much. But she shared about a little bit about Secretary Blinken's recent visit to India, where they highlighted the strength of that partnership, US and India as the two largest democracies in the world, and the security importance. She also spoke about the Quad security alliance in that area, and would like to see that expanded further to include other countries. Again, I think as security is an important element of building a basis for economic development, stability, and growth. And she took an interesting point. She would like to see India taking a more active leadership role in some of these groups. I read into her remarks that India tends to be a little more bilateral and involved, but not really leading. And as the world's largest democracy, she felt they could do a little bit more in that area. I believe that's really sums up kind of what we talked about. And there's a lot of room for further deepening. What we want to do in our economic group is focus a little bit on the free trade zones and the Kaesong industrial complex. So we're looking to explore that as part of enhancing the trade between North and South Korea in the future. But these trading groups, regional blocks, I think you would have to say it's a complex situation, but it can be a force for aiding the Korean situation more than hindering. Right. So thank you very much. I appreciate the chance to be on the panel.
Thank you so much, Alan. Great session and great report. It's certainly an important topic to consider, the possible economic union as we were originally phrasing it, but the bringing together of these different areas. So now I'd like to welcome he spoke on the previous session, but he's going to report on another session, Dr. Franco Famularo, who's also the president of EPF in Canada. He's going to be reporting on a joint session we did with the European team just a few days ago, talking about the Bering Strait Tunnel project. So welcome, Dr. Franco.
Well, good morning and good afternoon. As Mrs. Moffitt just reported that this session was on the Bering Strait Undersea Tunnel project, and it was a great collaboration between Europe and North America. The session was very ably moderated by Mrs. Maria Nazarova, Secretary General of UPF Russia. And the three panelists, Dr. Viktor Razbegin from Russia, Mr. Lou Cerny from the United States, and Dr. Peter Stockdale from Canada gave very well-informed insights into the various dimensions and issues relating to the realization of this massive project. First, Dr. Rasbegin, who's the co-founder of the Intercontinental Railway, drew attention to the concentration of the global population in coastal areas of the world, leaving the interior regions relatively underdeveloped in terms of minerals and other goods. He explained that rail infrastructure would be the issue, as road networks are not as efficient as rail or sea networks. The key element in the project is the rail link between Yakutsk and Fort Nelson in Canada. Yakutsk is in Russia, eastern Russia. It's a 6,000 kilometer stretch of terrain, much of it over permafrost, in addition to the undersea tunnel. So the geology around the Bering Strait tunnel area is suitable for the building of a tunnel, which would connect all the world's rail systems and bring power transmission lines into contact with each other. He estimates the total investment of the project would be around $75 to $90 billion in today's dollars, with a return on investment over a 25-year period. Benefits would include moving over 100 million tons of cargo per year through the system, overcoming the extreme isolation of related areas. Finally, he noted that the Alaska to Alberta Railway has received the presidential permit of the former administration, and that Russia also plans to continue to develop its rail network toward the Bering Strait. We next heard from Mr. Lou Cerny. He's a rail consultant and engineer and past executive director of the American Railway Engineering Association. And he emphasized that the conversion from sea shipping to rail shipping is environmentally positive. For instance, it would relieve the environmental pressure on ports throughout the world, lowering gas and oil consumption for shipping cargo. He added that the tunnel and the railway links, which already exist in some places over permafrost, are technologically feasible and would add huge additional capacity for cargo, 7,600 metric tons per day. He also spoke about the fact that it would be an electric system powered by hydroelectric power, which I thought was significant for all those that are concerned about the environmental impact. And finally, he compared the potential and significance of the Alaska to Northeast Russia corridor's tonnage capacity with that of the Suez Canal. And finally, with a very different perspective, Dr. Peter Stockdale, a Canadian policy analyst specializing in environment, indigenous, and intergovernmental affairs, spoke about his main concern, which is the environmental impact of the project, noting that the global melting of ice, the softening of permafrost, and the flooding of coastal areas. And he wondered whether the global carbon footprint would increase as a result of the project, considering the potential negative effects of this scale of development on polar and subpolar regions. He nevertheless noted that the current Governor General of Canada, who was just appointed in the last few weeks, Mary Simon, is Inuit, and she has been the ambassador to the Arctic Circle regions and to other countries in her prior responsibilities, that she may have a strong interest in this project and that this is something that UPF should look into. So we were very encouraged by the panel, and we look forward to further collaboration between the United States, Canada, Russia, and the region, which will all benefit from this project. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Famularo. Great report and a very substantial conversation about the building of this tunnel across the Bering Strait. Very wonderful. And I'm going to give a brief report on the session that I moderated just a few hours ago, which was also a partnership with the European Middle East team. We had a really loaded panel with a lot of wisdom and insight to offer, over 5 panelists, and still kept it within the time limit, which was a success. Basically, each of these panelists were speaking from a specific worldview. We had Dr. Kim, who was representing the Russian point of view, but he really spoke most strongly about North Korea and South Korea. And one interesting point he brought up was the idea that he actually had quite a pessimistic view of the reunification of the Korean Peninsula. He did not see it happening in 10 or 15 years. Partially, one of the challenges is the international influence, that North Korea feels that they are the true Korea because they don't have international influence in their affairs. So that was a very intriguing point. And actually, a nice note is Dr. Kim was answering all the questions that were coming in, typing it in the chat. So he was really helping all the participants be engaged throughout the whole program. We had Dr. Ward, who was speaking from a UPF point of view and expressing how these types of, soft power type 2 diplomacy can really be helpful in bridging the gap between these nations. And actually, Dr. Kim also mentioned that he had held conferences of scientists from North Korea and South Korea together, and from Russia, and how these, other options of bridging the gap and communicating between these nations can help culturally to close the gap between these different groups. Mr. Klingner spoke from the perspective of the informal trilateral agreement between Japan, South Korea, and America. And what he spoke about was that, America has, the United States has good relationships with both Japan and South Korea. But of course, as Larry brought up in his presentation, the relationship between South Korea and Japan is not as strong. And so the United States plays a very important role in bridging that gap as well. And it's an important one to consider should this eventual moment of collapse of North Korea or change in regime happen, that these nations are working together. Mr. Breen spoke very strongly about the idea that the perspectives and the cultural perspectives of South Korea and North Korea, he also felt would not contribute to the reunification of the Korean Peninsula. But the very intriguing point he brought up is we sometimes synonymize the words peace and reunification. But his point was that we should really try to pursue peace. Reunification is quite a political strategy and quite intense to ask of these parties. But if we could reach for peace, it might be more possible. He is living in South Korea and talked about the idea of being able to drive up to Pyongyang and have dinner there, that there could be some kind of transport and some type of freedom of movement amongst the nations while still respecting their organizations. And we had Mr. Fairvik, who came from Norway, and he was representing the perspective of China. And, the interesting question he posed towards the end was, why hasn't China taken a stronger position with North Korea as a stronger power in that relationship? And in fact, China allies strongly with South Korea in terms of trade, but still supports, the regime of North Korea hasn't made any strong arm holds there. So it was an extremely interesting panel. It was hard to keep it in time, but definitely I think there's a great partnership working with representatives from all over the world to bring in important experts on this topic. So thank you again to all of our moderators and coordinators, and also to all the panelists who joined these many sessions. We do have one more session tomorrow focusing on the role of media in reunification. This is also a partnership with the Europe team. And at this time, we're getting towards the closing of our final session here, but I'd like to welcome a message from Congressman Dan Burton, who is a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from 1983 to 2013. He's also now the global chairman of the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace. Welcome, Congressman Burton.
Is he muted?
The sound is not coming through. Okay, while our technical team is getting that situated, we will, oh, you got it.
Starts the program today. It's amazing how Mother Moon, Dr. Hakshahan Moon, has been able to bring these leaders together through UPF. She and Dr. Walsh and Dr. Jenkins and many, many other people that I have too many to name. They do so much and work so hard to bring about peace. And that's why I think these conferences are so important, because it extends the reach of their efforts to bring about peace for the world. Today, we're going to be, in the next 3 days, we're going to be talking about other ways to bring about peace and solve the world's problems. Governmental leaders, they try to do their part, but it's important, very important, that people in other walks of life do their very best to help to bring about peace in this world. And one of the biggest areas that we'd like to see resolved, the problems in North and South Korea. That's one of the things they've been working on through UPF for a long, long time. And because of the importance of that part of the world and that continent, or those two countries, it's extremely important that we put that at the forefront so we don't see another conflict break out that will cause severe problems in this world. So today, in my short period of time, I'd like to say to all the people who are watching around the world, it's important that you get involved, that your organizations get involved, that your non-governmental organizations get involved, and your religious groups to talk about world peace. In a world like what we have today with the virus and with the threat of possibly even nuclear war, it's so important that we realize the paramount objective that we ought to seek is a peaceful world. And everyone working together and talking together about this, I think, can reach that goal. I'm honored to be the co-chair of the International Parliamentarians for Peace. And we've been reaching out to parliamentarians and ex-parliamentarians all over the world. We have thousands that are now involved, but we need more people involved. And that's why I say to all of you who are watching today, please get involved. Talk to your leaders in your country, not just the governmental leaders, but the people in all walks of life, the NGOs, the church people. Talk to them about getting involved in the quest for world peace and solving these problems. If we all get together and do that, I'm sure things will be good throughout the 21st century. And with that, thank you for letting me say a few words today. It's really nice to be with you, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Congressman Burton. Always wonderful to hear from you, and a great call to action for all of us watching to get involved and bring what we can to this pressing issue at this time. And I'd like to welcome our final speaker today. We have Reverend Naokimi Ushiroda, who is the president of the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification in the United States. Welcome, Reverend Ushiroda.
Thank you, Kaeleigh. I'm sure everyone's excited to know that I am the final speaker, and I'm grateful to have the honor to close us out. You know, I think the vision that Father and Mother Moon had for this whole project of reunifying North and South Korea is very close to home. You know, that's where they were born, grew up, and it's really their dream. And I'm really proud of UPF for really taking the lead in bringing all of these experts together globally to address this issue on so many different complicated levels. I mean, even just from the summaries that I heard today, there's you know, every aspect you have to consider, the different worldviews, there's the trust factor, the economic factor, even environmental issues. So yeah, it was very inspiring to see all the different efforts that's being made to address this issue. And I know there's still so much to do, but I think UPF is uniquely positioned to gather people from all sides to be able to come to the same table to have those conversations. So really kudos to UPF and all the great work that you've been doing. As for Family Federation, I serve as the president currently. And yesterday I had the opportunity to be in the Bronx for a local Peace Road event. So I was basking in the sunlight out in a park, and together with Dr. Jenkins, actually, we were both there. And, you know, I think what Family Federation can bring to the table in addressing this reunification is this vision of one family under God, starting with really emphasizing the importance of love within the family and expanding from there. You know, we believe strongly that the family is the school of love. And by really strengthening relations between husband and wife, parents and children, and among siblings, with this concept of living for the sake of others, when the children and when the members of the family experience this in their own family, and they're able to extend that concept to their neighbors, their friends, their colleagues, their society, nation, and world, then there's a possibility for peace in this world. So I really believe, again, I don't have the expertise as you guys have, but I think from Family Federation's perspective, what we can do is really encourage this culture of heart with our members worldwide, and really help nations, the people who represent those nations, to start seeing each other more and more as family, not as competitors, but really as long lost brothers and sisters, that we really want to make this work because we love each other, because, you know, this world needs to come together as one family. And I believe Father and Mother Moon brings this unique perspective of parenthood, the need for parents for the world, or in the position of true parents, to really be able to bring the different countries together as sibling nations and really love each other. So that's what I hope to contribute from Family Federation. I'm excited to continue to partner with UPF in making this dream a reality.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Naokimi. Wonderful to end our closing session today, emphasizing the heart and, you know, the purpose behind what we're doing as one family. Dr. Jenkins, I'll turn it to you for any closing remarks of the closing session.
Well, thank you again, and congratulations to all of UPF and to Family Federation and all our affiliated organizations. Again, the moderators are to be commended. We had one of the best ILCs we've ever had. Again, thanks to our founder, Dr. Hakshahan Moon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.